What up, y'all? Finally, I finished this book. I've been jumping around from book to book. Let me get this book on here. Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks. Okay, so this book, I wanted to read this book just because I hear a lot of stuff. Every time someone brings up feminism, they bring up Bell Hooks, and I've been referenced to her work many times. I've been buying a lot of books lately, and it never was really on my list to read Bell Hooks or read anything feminist based, but I read a book, so I mean read a lot. I read the whole book, and I have a ton of notes and a ton of things that I marked and highlighted and a bunch of stuff. I just wanted to give basically just an overview and just basically my experience reading it. So I picked this book up because I love black women. I love the black community. It's really the only reason I read this book, because I have a lot of other things that are more from an economic and business perspective that I could be reading. But I just picked this up just to get a better understanding and maybe understand better where people are coming from when they're saying feminism, because this is like the queen bee, Bell Hooks. Overall, for my read of this book, I think I got basically I see it's void of any long-term. My biggest criticism is it's void of any long-term focus or any community. Like, nothing she's saying is mentioning the community at large. Like, how is it affecting everybody? This thing that you want to change, how is it affecting everyone? And that was something I was hoping to get from it. I was hoping that she would include that. When I speak to people individually, they don't often include, but I was hoping that she would include, but I didn't get it as much as I thought. And then also, I was hoping to get a more clear definition of a lot of the terms and a lot of the words and things that I've seen and I hear when people talk about feminism, and I didn't really get it. Like, for instance, a phrase used often in the book: sex is exploitation and oppression. But it was never really defined. So I was just hoping that there was a lot of things that would be defined. Now, I know Bell Hooks has a lot of different work, and with her having a lot of work, I'm sure if I go get other books, I could find it. But I asked around, and a lot of people recommended this one, so I started with this one. I think if you're in a position that I was in, I wouldn't recommend this book. I think maybe there's another book that would go deeper into things. This book, and I think this is what she did do a good job of. She explained, this was like a feminist history book, to be honest with you. And she explained the progression of different feminist ideologies, reaching all the way back to the 60s, and at times reaching further back than that, just discussing. It's basically talking about history, but it's not breaking down the ideas. It's not breaking down the words that are being used. It's not going into detail and stating a case for the need for feminism and the need for some of these ideas. That's what I was more so looking for. Yeah, but there's just a lot of things in here. Let me see. I'm gonna just go over some of my notes. I ain't gonna be on here too long. But let's see. Page 15 and 16. It says women can't be equal until the domination. Oh, there we go. That's one thing I like about this. So people do talk about this with Bell Hooks. She does point out the fact that there's a lot of racism when you're dealing with feminism. Okay, in many occasions she points this out. And she's pointing out, she even went back in history and she pointed out during the abolitionist movement, there were white women who wanted to push for there to be the ability for everyone to vote. However, they realized that if everyone could vote, that would include blacks, and they would rather that blacks couldn't vote, and they gave up on the woman thing. They sided with their men against blacks to stay, instead of fighting for women to be able to vote. So she points out that, and I agree with her, there are a lot of points in this movement where white women are never going to side with you. And she points this out in many different ways. It's all through my notes. I don't want to hold y'all up looking through this book, looking for quotes, but it's all through my notes where she's pointing that out. But my biggest thing, that leads me into one of the biggest criticisms of her, is if that's the case, why are you siding with these people to do any type of feminism? I don't understand that. Why are you siding with women that have shown you time and time again that when it comes down to it, they're going to side with their white their white men before they're going to side with you, you know? And as far as I can see, it's always going to benefit them to side with their white men before they side with you. And she said it herself, that if she said it in this book, that if they can't, if there's no, shoot, she was just basically saying that if women in the movement, in the feminist movement, don't want to divest from their benefit on racist patriarchy. That's another word. She uses patriarchy a lot. I'm not really sure what it means, but if they don't want to divest from that, there's really nothing that they're going to get from the movement, because they're going to put their racism before they're going to put their feminism. So she does a great job of pointing that out. But other than that, there's just a lot of things in here. I'm going to just point out a few. What did she say here? Page 25. She says women. Oh, yeah. So she's talking about here about how the way that women are able to get their liberation, most of what that was needed for their liberation was basically the technology to get birth control. But my thing is the way she's focusing on it. Like she says here, before there could be any gender equity around the issue of free love, women needed access to safe contraceptives and abortions, right? So she's equating abortions. She's saying you need abortions, and I'm looking for the next example, but she's saying and contraceptives and these things for women that have gender equity, basically saying because you can have sex with men without there being an unwanted pregnancy. She uses unwanted pregnancy as a big example of what ties women down. But my thing is, when you start going down that road, you're not dealing with the fact that women need to make better choices. You're almost throwing that out of the window. You see what I mean? All for the purpose of liberation, but to what end? And that goes to what I said in the beginning. A lot of these ideas really have nothing to do with anything except the individual woman's whatever small benefit it may make, but what is the overall benefit to everyone, So for us to sit here and focus on the fact that you have sexual freedom and you can make decisions to sleep with people that you wouldn't want to be pregnant by, I'm not saying that this should not exist, but you have to realize the long-term impact of you putting a focus on being able to do something like that. It doesn't really help us as a community. Oh, page 34. So on the page 34, she brings this up, and I thought this was interesting. If I could find it. So she says here, girls today, and this is beauty without. So she basically talking about beauty in this chapter. She says girls today are often just as self-hating when it comes to their bodies as their pre-feminist counterparts are. Then we go down here. It says, no feminist-oriented fashion magazine appear to offer all female alternative visions of beauty. And then let me see. Then there's another one on another page where she's bringing up in cinema. She's saying in cinema and in these magazines and different things, they're not bringing up all the different alternatives of beauty. But my issue with it is she's framing it to where it's like what we consider beauty. Like there's a part where she says in movies you'll see they'll put very thin women, and this is a sexist view. But my thing is, how are you determining that it's sexist? You see what I mean? Who is the one that's going to judge the beauty of what a woman looks like? Like who uses this in most cases? And for the most part, it's men who are judging what they feel beautiful. And you could say, look, well, we need to represent all different types of beauty. Yeah, we should. It shouldn't be just one type, but you don't get to necessarily choose that, because the ones who are looking at you for your beauty in most cases, by the way nature is set up, are going to be men. So I don't understand how is it sexist to say, oh, they're putting this one type in. Now I've heard the argument, like for instance, you could say there's a racist way that they do things, where they find an archetype that's more common with white women, and they'll push that out, and they'll say, okay, this is what more like white women look like, and they'll make sure they only push that out, but they'll never take into consideration a large percentage of the market share that's watching their things and doing or living in the country coexisting would be, for instance, black people. They won't show a way that, you know, you may have sisters that have more wide hips more often, fuller lips. They won't represent these things, and they'll only represent one thing. I could see the racism, you know, I see that happening more often. But I just don't, I don't see, you can't necessarily call it sexist for men to say what they like and what they want to call beauty to me. What does it say here? Women, self-hating alternatives. I had a few because I got notes all throughout this book. Oh yeah, so on page 4.